Hi, I'm Carrie. Thanks for checking out my video. Today I'm going to talk about cutting strips of fabric and using your rotary cutter. Let's get started. Before we get started, let's discuss some of the tools that you'll want to have gathered before you cut your fabric. So first you're going to need a ruler. So I have my cutting ruler here. I was asked if there was anything special about this one, and my first instinct was no, not really. But I've used other rulers that didn't quite meet my needs. This one is just a simple ruler that came with the 3-pack of the Fiskars. It came with the cutting mat, it came with the rotary cutter, and this template. One thing I noticed with this one is that it does mark every 1/16 of an inch, and then it has this 1/2 inch mark here that's pink on one side, one of the long sides and one of the short sides. So as I'm wanting to get that 1/2 inch measurement, I've realized that having that is useful. And then having the 1/16 of an inch marking on here is something that I found useful too for the cutting that I've needed to do. If you don't have that marking, it's not a big deal. You may not need it, or you could always kind of guesstimate in between there. It's not that hard of a measurement to find if you just need it every once in a while. Another thing I like to do is I have a certain width of strip that I've been cutting. I've been making a lot of fabric masks. So I marked my tape, my ruler with the tape here. I have 3 that are marked on the measurement that I want. And I find this is useful because I can typically line up at least 2 of these markings depending on how I'm using the ruler. So I've had this on here for quite a while now, and this is the measurement I need. It's quick and easy to find. So if you're doing a lot of cutting on something and you want a consistent measurement, this is one way to make sure that you're going to get that same measurement every time. So of course you need your rotary cutter. This is just a basic 45 millimeter cutter. I do like this one because it does retract the blade. So I push this button here to get the blade out to cut, and then I push this one here to retract the blade. One important thing is to always have this blade retracted whenever you're not using it. So regardless of the cutter that you're using, you never want your blade to be sitting down and be exposed. If you get into the habit of doing that, then if you ever go to a class or a sew-in or something of that nature, then you don't have to worry about someone accidentally picking up your rotary cutter, or maybe it falls and hurts somebody or something of that nature. You don't want to be responsible for that. So always keep that blade retracted. You want a nice sharp blade. If you use a dull blade, then that increases your chances of slipping or cutting yourself, messing up your project, or what have you. The last thing you want to do is stop your project and go to the ER and get stitches because you didn't have a sharp blade. For this project, I have a very long cut of fabric. I'm only going to cut, for now, this amount. For what I'm doing, again, I'm making a lot of masks. I want to have a mark. This mark is just telling me where I'm going to do something with my project, so I have it marked. So what I did here was I took each end of the fabric. So both ends of the fabric are lined up here. I cut them nice and straight, and I'm lining them up with the edges together, ready for me to cut. So I like to mark the bottom one where I need it, and then I have this over here lining them up, and I marked the top one. You can use a pen, you can use chalk, whatever tool that you need to use for yourself, so that you might not even need the mark. If you're just doing sashing and you're not marking anything, then you don't need to worry about this step. For the project that I'm working on, I want to have a mark here. I don't want to cut individual strips and then go back and mark it. To me, it's a lot easier to go ahead and mark it and then cut it so that those marks are there. Another thing I like to do is I always keep in mind safety. So one thing I keep in mind is where I'm going to put my hand on my ruler, how I'm going to cut it. And if I keep this fabric, it's going to put stress on my back because I'm going to have to go out pretty far with my arm to reach out here to cut the end of the fabric. So what I like to do is fold this over, and I may or may not want to see this mark, but I like to fold it over so it makes that a lot shorter, and that's going to put less stress on my back, elbow, shoulders as I'm cutting it. And I only really need to worry about getting it nice and straight this far. So I know one of the issues you may run into when you fold fabric like this is maybe it gets a little wonky and it's not perfectly straight. Depending on the project you're working on, that may or may not matter. For what I'm doing, a little bit of that angle is not going to make a big deal for my project. The more you cut, you might find once you get down here that you might need to set it out again and then cut it nice and straight and then start over. You might not want to go this whole cut of fabric without at least making it straight somewhere in the middle down the line. So what I'm going to do now is, you also may have seen that some people like to buy the shower holders that have the suction cups. So there's a suction cup here and then a handle on there that makes it nice and sturdy. That's one great thing to do with your rulers if you choose. You can also buy some clear backing to put on here. So this ruler does have some grip on here to help me keep it in place. But there's another backing you can buy for that to give you some more stability. So for what I'm doing, this is sufficient. This is how I operate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up my tape. This is the measurement I want. So I'm lining up my tape with the edge of the fabric. And then I'm always mindful of where I place my hand. So I want my hand, if I can, I want it to be behind where I'm going to be cutting. And I want it to be as far away as I can. You don't want it to slip. So one thing over the years I've learned working with various tools is you always want to think about what's going to happen if I slip. So if you're using a screwdriver or a wrench or a rotary cutter, you want to think about what's going to happen if it slips. And that should help you determine where you're going to place your hand and the things you need to keep in mind. So now I'm ready to use my blade. I just changed this blade yesterday, so it's nice and sharp. So I'm still going to be careful. And so I'm going to take my blade out. I'm going to place my hand as far back as I can, but I also need to make sure that I don't slip and move my ruler, because I want to make sure my ruler stays right here. So I'm going to press straight down. I'm going to line up this blade, and it's going to obviously touch the end of the edge of the ruler, but I don't want to push to the left. That's going to move my ruler around. I want to focus on pushing down and straight out. I don't want to put pressure moving either side because I don't want that ruler to move, and I want a nice straight cut. So I'm going to push down on my ruler. I'm going to push straight down with my blade, and I'm just going to move right along that edge, and it gives to the end of the fabric and give me a nice straight cut. And that didn't quite cut all the way through. There are 8 layers of fabric right here. So I want to make sure I get a nice clean cut. I'm just going to peel that back, and I can see it cut through all of the fabric. For this many layers, you might want to consider the 60mm rotary cutter. That might be a little bit better of a tool to use if you're going to do this a lot. But this 45mm, I've had great luck with it. It's been working just fine. So now I can take my strips, and I'm going to lay them out for my project. I'm just going to move these off to the side. All of my marks are facing up to the top, so they're all the same. So again, I'm going to take my ruler. I'm going to line up my blue pieces of tape here. I'm going to place my hand somewhere that's safe. Start cutting. And if I need to move my hand, I can. You can just slow down your cutting, maybe move your hand behind, but you want to keep in mind, if this slips, I don't want my hand right here. Hey. And there we go. Thanks for checking out my video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks.